All right, episode 130 of the CSIS Capital Cable this week. The Ninth Party Congress, DPRK issues front and center. With us, Pacheco Pardo, Seiler, Kim to unpack it all. All that and more next on the 130th installment of the CSIS Capital Cable. All right, good morning to those of you in DC. Good evening to those of you in Asia. Good day, I guess, to those of you in Europe and around the world. Welcome to the 130th installment of the CSIS Capital Cable. I'm Mark Lippert, your host and moderator. This week on the Capital Cable, the Ninth Workers' Party's Congress. I can't talk already. And with us to unpack it all, an all-star Hall of Fame cast here with Dr. Ramon Pacheco Pardo, Mr. Sid Seiler, and Dr. Lami Kim. Really good stuff here this week. And let me introduce formally our panelists one by one. I'm going to go in no particular order, but I'm going to go with Ramon Pacheco Pardo first, who is a professor of international relations at King's College London and the KFVUB chair at the Brussels School of Governance. Also, this is a very cool title, the King's Regional Envoy for East and Southeast Asia, which obviously helps to shape and implement the university strategy in the region. Look his bio up online, well published, including with our own Dr. Cha. I'm sorry you had to work with Victor, Ramon. It's a real burden, but you're an unbelievable amount of research, teaching, expertise, and public engagement. And of course, he did his PhD at the London School of Economics. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be back.
All right. I think the last time you were on the show, just briefly, you were outside, I think, the Spanish government headquarters, for lack of a better term, with Victor doing almost a drop-in on the show. So it's good to have you here, seated and fully engaged this time.
Yeah, it's great actually to be seated, as you say.
All right, excellent. All right, thanks. We will take any of you, but we're just happy we get all of you this time. All right, excellent. All right, next we're going to go to Dr. Lami Kim. She is Korea Chair in Advanced Technologies, National Security, Defense at the International Institute for Strategic Studies, commonly known as IISS. She worked for the U.S. Department of Defense at APCSS, that's the Daniel K. Inouye Asia Pacific Center for Security Studies. She has an amazing repertoire of publications, public engagement as well. Also affiliated with a number of illustrious centers, including the Harvard Belfer Center, Wilson Center Pacific Forum. It's amazing. And her educational credentials include a PhD degree from the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy at Tufts University and a master's from Harvard. Dr. Kim, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
All right, outstanding. And last, and certainly not least, Mr. Sid Seiler. Sid, of course, is well known to the show. He has spent almost 40 years in the U.S. government, where he did it all from the intelligence community, DNI, CIA, for diplomacy, including special envoy jobs, the White House policy jobs at the NSC. Sid really has done it all, and I would be remiss. Obviously, he was on pen, as they say, at United States Forces Korea, and he's a proud graduate of Yonsei University, where both my kids were born, by the way. All right, Sid, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Mark.
All right, outstanding. All right, let's get into it. Deadly serious topic here. I'm going to turn to Ramon first to just walk us through what happened at the Ninth Workers' Party Congress, if I'm saying it correctly. It's a little early. I've got my terms jumbled, but walk us through this event that, I think is generally significant among North Korea watchers and does generally garner some international attention, but has been really drowned out, for lack of a better term, by the events in the Middle East, the events in and around Iran. So I think this is a really timely and informative show here to really get caught up on an important moment here in the trajectory of DPRK. But again, Ramon, welcome back to the show, and please, the floor is yours.
Thanks. So I think, well, Kim Jong-un convened the party congress for the first time in 5 years. They should be taking place every 5 years. So that's also important to note because for 2, 3 decades, from the 1980s until Kim Jong-un took office, actually, we didn't have party congresses. And I think there was a focus on three different areas. First of all, we can see how confident Kim feels about himself, and how confident he is on his position. He talked about the improvement of the North Korean economy over these past 5 years, and from the data that we have, this seems to be the case. He renewed the cadres in the party with a younger generation that is probably going to be closer to him in their way of thinking. And he also generally talked about the strength of North Korea in geopolitical terms. Second important point, I think there was a discussion as to whether there would be a message towards the US and South Korea, and there was. Not a new message, but a reiteration of the message that North Korea has been pressing ahead these past few months, or in the case of South Korea, these past few years. So in the case of the US, a focus on the potential resumption of dialogue with the US under the Trump administration, with President Trump, but under North Korean terms. And when it comes to South Korea, the hostile message that we have seen over the past 2, 3 years, South Korea still being labeled the top enemy state of North Korea. And I think the third point, important issue we're looking at, is whether Kim Ju-ae, Kim Jong-un's daughter, would actually make an appearance. She didn't during the Congress. She did afterwards during the military parade that took place right afterwards. And I think it was quite significant that she was presented in North Korean media being side to side with her father, looking at the North Korean troops, military equipment. They were wearing similar clothes, and she really took center stage during the parade. So no official confirmation that she's the heir apparent of her father. I wasn't expecting that personally, but clearly the messaging that she's central to the Kim family and therefore to the North Korean regime.
All right, outstanding laid out. Let me come back with one follow-up then. You laid out three different areas, very interesting. One is confidence projected, both, I guess you'd say, domestically and internationally. Two, a reiteration of messages from the U.S. to the U.S. rather, and South Korea. And three, I guess, succession, for lack of a better term. What about the economy in terms of where it's headed? And is that in the confidence bucket in terms of they think the Pyongyang thinks the economy is on the right direction, and that came out in the party congress. What about the internal, I guess, economic and commercial issues in North Korea?
I think you're right. There is this projection from North Korea, the economy is improving. So the previous party congress was 2021, right after the COVID-19 pandemic. And of course, the North Korean economy had done very poorly because the North Korean regime decided to close the borders of the country. But now there have been a couple of big changes. The first one, of course, the close cooperation between North Korea and Russia following Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and North Korea receiving economic support, energy resources from Russia. So not only weapons and technology, but also helping to prop up the North Korean economy. And secondly, of course, relations with China have improved in recent months. The border, as far as we know, is pretty much fully reopened between China and North Korea, which allows for more trade between the two countries. And we do think that China has been also providing economic support to the North Korean regime. And I think this will continue as long as Russia's invasion of Ukraine continues, because Russia has all the incentives to continue to support the North Korean economy in return for all the military help that we know Pyongyang is offering to Moscow.
All right, outstanding. Last follow-up for me, just in terms of the leadership cadre there in North Korea, as you sifted through who sat where, who was close to Kim Jong-un, who was featured on the media, all the things a North Korea watcher does. Did anything strike you in terms of any change in direction, or rather change in personnel at the top echelon coming out of the party Congress?
Well, I find interesting that Kim Yo-jong, the sister of Kim Jong-un, has been elevated within the party, because there has been this discussion as to what extent the internal dynamics within the Kim family tell us who may take over from Kim Jong-un in the future, right? And there's this line of thought that Kim would rather have his daughter or one of the two sons that we think he has or he may have to take over from him rather than his sister. But then his sister is getting more and more power within the party, which may tell us that there are also those supporting her, not only her brother, but others supporting her to have a greater say in domestic issues in North Korea. Before she was focusing more on foreign affairs and especially relations with South Korea. And this could actually create her own power base. We don't have any evidence that this is the case, but I think her new position within the party means that she has to be seriously considered as a potential contender for the future leadership of North Korea. Even as I said before, I would assume that Kim Jong-un would rather have one of his daughter, it looks like, take over in the future. But of course, these early days, because he's still in his 40s, and his health seems to be better than it was a few years ago. This should be noted as well. That a few years ago, we had the discussion about how long is he really going to live. I mean, he was very obese. Thing we could tell that he was aging by the day, but I think his health seems to be a bit better now, which tells us that probably he will be in power still for a long period of time.
Okay, outstanding. Yeah, on the health note, I still recall he in his 30s with the case of gout, right? I mean, that was telling, right? Anyway, but interesting stuff there. Okay, over to you, Sid. Sid, your thoughts on the Party Congress, and take it any direction you see fit.
Sure, Mark. Thanks. A lot to cover, isn't there? You know, it is a new phenomena that these party congresses have been timed toward the end of the year, so that what these party congress readouts then serve the role that previously we had joint editorials, we had speeches by Kim Jong-un. So it's our one insight into how North Korea projects its view of the world, remembering it's a domestic audience as well as an international audience. Fundamentally, it's propaganda. So what we see in there, what we've tried over the years, for example, to determine whether we can track actual improvements or setbacks on the economic side to what's stated in a editorial, a speech, or a party Congress readout, it's very difficult. Again, they're not really designed to inform, they're designed to inspire. So there is a lot of hype. There's a certain messages they want to focus on. And so we see that as, particularly not surprising in terms of what we've seen. The nuclear piece is interesting because it seems like North Korea goes through periods of accelerated development and demonstration in the missile and the nuclear realm, and then periods where they back off. They complete a research and development cycle. They focus on production and domestic deployment, and they seek to mitigate international pressure. And so there's been a stand down on nuclear testing. There's been a slowdown on missile launches over the past 12 months. And you look at the report, it's kind of like trying to capture continued momentum forward without playing up two great accomplishments. Matter of fact, irreversible language, already succeeding at deterring, but we need to grow up more to deter more. We need to have a nuclear command and control, a credible one. So they talked about this focus on an integrated nuclear crisis response system, and various drills of the handling and operating of nuke weapons, so that they project the ability to credibly move, mate, and launch these devices without any, again, I repeat, without any evidence that they're actually doing it or they're going to do it. It's obviously they're showing these areas where they feel a little bit maybe less ready to move forward than before, less confident that their deterrent is actually working. And I think as you look at some of the language, even the language toward the United States, which was marked by this: you're hostile, you're imperialist, you're hegemonic, you're out to bring about our collapse. However, if you change your position, we're willing to talk. That language, which generated a lot of headlines and was probably overstated as a reach out or a signal to the United States dialogue is impending, that language has been pretty standing now since Hanoi. I think part of it is they see value in the international community to appear to be open to dialogue, even as they're not. And you think about all the questions we get: when is President Trump going to engage the North? Many people think the ball is in the U.S. court because of this language, but there, again, that's nothing in the language that is uniquely a change from what we've seen over the past several years. Also, it demonstrates.
Can I just come in on one point
sure.
to sharpen it, to ask you the question? In the past, the U.S., I think inaccurately so, was especially as you got beyond the Bush administration and into Obama and Trump, was accused of having preconditions on talks. This appears to me to the North Koreans have now set preconditions on talks, right? And in other words, if you change your policy, we will talk to you. And that, again, isn't something new since Hanoi, frankly. Is that a fair statement? I just want to draw an underline under that particular piece there, because to your point, there has been a lot of press on it, and I just want to sharpen and highlight that issue.
Excellent. The message to the domestic audience and the message to the international audience is eventually countries will come to accept North Korea as a nuclear power. The nuclear issue will never appear again in any dialogue that anybody has with us, and let's just move on. They seem to have achieved a lot in that regard vis-a-vis Russia, to a lesser degree China. Some of Lee Jae-myung's own language suggests South Korea sees a need for a wide range of talks, even if the nuclear issue has to be put on a far back burner. And now Kim seeks to have the same type of deliverable out of the United States. If the United States insists on dialogue being about denuclearization, they're not interested. Now, I personally believe that all of this is workable, that the president himself could come up with language that kind of said, let's get real. We don't want a world with nuclear weapons. I've acted decisively in Iran to ensure they don't get a nuclear weapon. But look, North Korea's already got these weapons. We need to sit down and talk. There are adversaries with nuclear issues in a very dangerous part of the world. It's better we talk than we don't. So the language of justification for the initial meeting, I think, is all there. Kim does take that risk of every time he meets with the Americans. First of all, domestic audience remembers Hanoi. There was a promise made by the regime that the future was so bright, everybody had to go out and buy some shades to wear. And Kim went in and out of Hanoi failing to secure those types of capitulation by President Trump, and it looked like a failure back home. And so I think they're still in a cleanup phase in terms of their propaganda line on the United States. That to say that we were wrong about the United States is to say that your leader was wrong.
All right, outstanding. Let me just come in real quick, and then that
Sure.
gets to the point, and it gets to the point where that Victor has made on the show, and frankly, Lee Jae-myung has basically said the same thing, which is, look, we're not giving up on denuclearization, but it's an awfully long process, and thereby you could see a framework for talks. One is talking about a long, drawn-out process of disarmament or, basically a rollback that ends in denuclearization, and the North gets to think that they're talking about arms control, basically, right? We've had that conversation on this show before.
Right. And as you know, every approach that we've taken, frankly, from the six-party talks through the February 29th Elite Day understanding of the Obama administration and then President Trump in Singapore, Hanoi, every administration has tried this phased approach, and North Korea's rejected it. Right now, there's no reason to believe that North Korea would take any part of its program on the table outside of exact proportionality. How many weapons do you have, the United States, China, Russia? That's how many we deserve. And anything beyond that is beyond conception. And so, just finally, let me wrap up on South Korea. I mean, the North is just a steady drumbeat, I guess, out of both Pyongyang and Seoul. Out of Pyongyang, We're not interested in talking. We're hostile enemies. We're irreconcilably antithetical, opponents to each other. From South Korea, we keep trying. The door is open. We're open to dialogue. And this can go on for a protracted period of time without really any forcing mechanism that should change it. But for now, grim prospects for any progress with South Korea.
All
And
right,
the United
outstanding.
States for that.
Lady.
No.
Oh, sorry, Sid. Apologies for stepping on your last line there. Outstanding. Thank you for the excellent intervention there. All right, you segued exactly where I wanted to go with Dr. Kim. South Korea, the peninsula, the defense posture, deterrence, all that good stuff in that bucket. Dr. Kim, obviously anything you want to say about the Party Congress, you're an expert in defense and military issues, among other things. Would you talk a little bit about the 5-year military plan coming out of the Party Congress, and then also talk about implications for posture on the peninsula, deterrence on the peninsula, U.S. ROK alliance, and how they should be thinking about this set of issues? The floor is yours.
Yeah, sure. I was particularly interested in North Korea's next 5-year military development plan. As Sid mentioned, North Korea will continue to enhance its nuclear arsenal, both nuclear warheads and delivery vehicles, both quantitatively and qualitatively. And a special emphasis was placed on sea-based nuclear arsenal. I think that refers to North Korea's continued development of SLBM, submarine launched ballistic missiles, and increase the range of SLBM to the intercontinental range. And also, it will continue to develop a nuclear powered submarine from which it can launch nuclear SLBMs. But I think there are no surprises there. But what is a little bit more concerning for South Korea is that North Korea is planning to deploy more usable weapons against South Korea, the tactical nuclear weapons, and it also recently displayed multiple rocket launchers that are dual capable, that can carry both nuclear weapons and conventional weapons. And North Korea, the report says that it will significantly increase the deployment of multiple rocket launchers that can cover the entire territory of South Korea. So that is concerning, and also it may indicate that North Korea is lowering the threshold for the use of nuclear weapons. Another thing that was interesting is that North Korea is planning to develop sort of a more cutting-edge emerging technologies like artificial intelligence and AI autonomous weapons. It has already claimed that it is using AI for guiding multiple rocket launchers and drones. I'm a little bit skeptical whether North Korea can really pull it off, but they are claiming that will do it. And also electronic warfare systems. North Korea has already developed and demonstrated GPS jamming and satellite jamming systems, and they will continue to enhance those capabilities. Probably one of the most ambiguous part of this report in the military side is the part where North Korea says it will develop the capability to attack satellites. So it is not really clear to me if those attacks mean kinetic attacks, with direct ascent anti-satellite weapons that will physically destroy those weapon satellites, or they just simply mean non-kinetic weapons attacks like with jamming and spoofing and that sort of stuff. Because the former will be very, very demanding tactically and costly. Only 4 countries now, the United States, Russia, China, and India, have that capability. And so I am a little bit skeptical on that part. But the last one is evolved military reconnaissance satellite. So North Korea has already placed one military satellite into orbit, but we know that it doesn't have high resolution lens, so it is not very useful as a reconnaissance asset. So I think that North Korea is probably waiting to get a high resolution lens until before try to launch another satellite into orbit.
All right, outstanding. Oh,
okay.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah,
well,
let
me come back with one quick question then, just a 2-finger intervention or a 2-finger follow-up here for you. The SLBM piece, pretty self-evident, second strike. Emerging technology, pretty self-evident. basically enhance your array of capabilities. What puzzles me in your laydown is, and help the viewers on this question, why so much emphasis, or why a strong emphasis rather, on putting so many offensive weapons, an array of weapons pointed at South Korea? What is gained by that, coupled with, I guess, the hostile rhetoric? Strategically, what does the North get out of that, coming out of the party congress?
Yeah, sure. In order to deter South Korea's attacks, I mean, it is unlikely that South Korea will attack North Korea first, but from North Korea's perspective, to deter South Korea, North Korea doesn't really have to do that much, right? I mean, that many multiple rocket launchers and the hostile rhetoric. I think it is really partially more toward the domestic audience to say that South Korea is our primary foe, and they are not our compatriots. And especially because North Korea, I think, the leadership is very threatened by the sort of soft power of South Korea, the spread of South Korean media content. It has been cracking down on it, but not very successful. And I think North Korea, the report actually mentions that South Korea is taking advantage of the period of reconciliation, referring to, I believe, 2018 and 2019, and to spread its cultural influence to overthrow the regime, overthrow the country or something, the system or something like that. And so I think it is partially to legitimize, in order to, partially to heighten the threat perception among the North Korean people of South Korea's hostility, and to legitimize cracking down on the spread of South Korean media content.
All right, outstanding. And please continue on your next point as well. Thanks for that detour there.
Sid, I think that Sid was...
No, I was just going to say, a two-finger, Lami, what you say is the best case scenario. The worst case scenario is that North Korea has a longer term revisionist orientation towards South Korea, that at some point, using disputed boundaries, maybe the West Sea, challenging the NLL, challenging some of the DMZ demarcation, the credibility of the threat to South Korea, it's not accomplished with ICBMs. It's accomplished with more credible vehicles like SRBMs that can range South Korea, so that North Korea can get a dominant upper hand. That's the more, I think, nefarious outline. You speak to kind of a peaceful coexistence where North Korea demonstrates clearly, you can't touch me, as opposed to one day I'll touch you and I'll touch you hard.
Yeah, I'm not ruling that possibility out. However, I think that South Korea also has very, pretty impressive conventional capabilities. And so, try to, really attack South Korea to unify the country, or for whatever other reasons, I think that would be very, very costly for North Korea. And so my sort of, of course, I can only speculate, but I'm sort of inclined to think that it's more sort of defensive and then, driven out of fear. But briefly on implications for South Korea, I think, I don't really think that what happened in North Korea last week will fundamentally shift the directions that South Korea is already heading into, but I think it will just only consolidate the recent trends, which is that South Korea has a very difficult task of deterring North Korea's nuclear threats with its conventional capabilities. When the credibility of U.S. extended deterrence is arguably at the lowest point. A lot of experts actually that I talked to in South Korea say that they're very concerned. And so that's why the calls for nuclear armament have been very strong. I mean, it had been around 70%, but since Trump's return to the White House, it went up to over 76%. And so, but I'm still not really too concerned that South Korea will try to acquire nuclear weapons. It is pursuing more sort of nuclear hedging, which is you try to acquire the capability to build nuclear weapons quickly without, crossing the threshold of nuclear armament. I think both conservatives and liberals are pursuing sort of nuclear latency, which refers to capability to do so, nuclear hedging. And I think that consensus today is nuclear hedging and latency. At the same time, South Korea is trying to enhance its conventional deterrence strategy, the three-axis systems, which is largely viewed as insufficient. However, that's what they have, and so they're trying to enhance those capabilities as well.
All right, outstanding. One quick follow, and then I want to get on to international implications beyond the peninsula. Dr. Kim, in the wake, or in the kind of basically ongoing U.S. ROK discussions on conventional force posture, right? What under the rubric that the Pentagon these days likes to call modernizing the alliance. I think some are uncomfortable with that term, but do you see the Party Congress having any material impact on those discussions, and or the directionality of where they might head?
I don't really think so, because I think the modernization of the alliance really, in a nutshell, in my opinion, is burden sharing. And the United States has been asking South Korea to do more to deter North Korea, so that the alliance can do more to counter China or other threats in the region. And so I don't really think that what happened in North Korea would change that. Actually, the most recent NCG meeting, Nuclear Consultative Group meeting that occurred at the end of last year, actually says that South Korea will take the leading role of deterring threats in North Korea on the Korean Peninsula. And so the burden sharing part, I think it's pretty evident. So yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, excellent, outstanding work there. We've peppered you with questions. We got about 15 minutes left. I want to come back to Ramon. Ramon, let's talk international implications of the North Korean, policy direction coming out of the Party Congress here. First, let's unpack a little bit China. Do you feel this has any material impact on the relationship with China, number one, and number two, how might President Trump's visit play into all of this? In that, especially, you have the Japanese Prime Minister racing to Washington in March ahead of the visit, right, to shape it. You've got, I think, Lee Jae-myung's summit visit to Beijing. I think this impending visit was in the margins, or at least in the penumbrance of the discussions. How do you see this relationship going forward with all of this, all of these different pieces in play here?
I do think that the implications for China are probably not that big, because the change in relations between North Korea and China has already been ongoing. I think when Kim Jong-un visited Beijing last September for the commemoration of the end of the Second World War, I think that was a way for both countries to show, along with Russia, of course, that the relations are in a sweet spot, right? That they are working together with each other, they are supporting each other, not only economically, as we have mentioned before, or militarily in the case of North Korea and Russia, but also obviously politically. What I do think, though, is that we shouldn't forget that Beijing in recent weeks has lost a couple of friendly regimes in Venezuela, and now it seems in Iran. And I think this is going to increase the leverage, or not the leverage, but the position of North Korea in the eyes of Beijing. It's losing close friends, really. And I think China will try to lean on or get closer or prop up other countries it has been working with. And obviously one of them is North Korea. What is the news, for example, about China buying more Russian oil? So talking about another important relationship for Beijing. And when it comes to President Trump, now the discussion is whether he will visit Pyongyang, or he will meet with Kim Jong-un, the North Korean leader, before or after the summit with Beijing. I'm pretty sure that China won't want this. China won't want to be overshadowed by a North Korea U.S. summit. But obviously, we know that President Trump is unpredictable. Last time he met with Kim Jong-un was when he was in Japan. And as we know, there was a tweet, and then there was a meeting with Kim Jong-un and Moon Jae-in, right, in the border between the two Koreas, in which he briefly crossed into North Korea as well. So could this happen again? We really don't know, actually, but we cannot say that this may not happen, even if I think China will be very displeased, because I think this would overshadow, at least in the news, the meeting that Xi Jinping is going to have with President Trump.
All right, outstanding. All right, we're getting short on time. Sid, over to you. I want you to, if you don't mind, obviously comment on what Ramon laid down in his intervention, but please get to the point of Iran, the implications of the events there on North Korea's thinking coming out of the Party Congress, number one, and number two, the ongoing Russia-Ukraine issue.
Sure. It's an accurate but somewhat pedestrian observation that Kim feels vindicated in his nuclear capabilities by what's happened to Iran. More importantly, I think, he sees President Trump as not an isolationist, as potentially unpredictable, willing to use force or the threat of the use of force to support negotiations. And so, the complications to the world order, even the very question about whether there will be a Xi Jinping Donald Trump summit amid the war situation we're currently in, and what it might look like. Increasingly, we see, I think, North Korea hedging. As I look through the wording in the Party Congress readout, a lot of talks about a complicated international situation, U.S. Unilateral options undermining that world order, but nothing in there that suggests a closeness by name or even implied to Russia or China in the works. That for now, even if there is a crink and there's some type of security, some strategic cooperation between these, each of them are seeing values of keeping a distance. Nobody's coming to Iran's aid at this time, and I think that'll be the lesson for North Korea. It was interesting that there was no mention of the support to the Russia. Interesting, but not surprising. No mention of the support to the Russia war effort, even as the soldiers from the heroes that returned marched in the parade. So I think there's still some value that North Korea sees in being more passive and wait and see, perhaps because they are looking for some type of talks with Trump in the near future, and they don't want anything to complicate it. But for right now, the status quo, it's a dynamic time right now, and North Korea has proven that it can survive these in the past, and it will survive them going forward. But there are going to be a period of increased engagement. There's going to be periods of decreased engagement. The same is true vis-a-vis China. Things will get better, but only so good. Things will get worse, but only so bad. It's not perfectly secular, but it's not anything that's radically transforming the dynamics of Northeast Asia.
All right, outstanding. Hedging is the word today. Dr. Kim mentioned the South Koreans hedging on nuclear policy, the North Koreans hedging. It sounds like everybody's hedging around the world these days. So, Dr. Kim, over to you on this last round of issues here in terms of international, I guess, implications coming out of the Party Congress. Anything that you want to add to either China, Iran, Russia, or different topics in this issue set?
Yeah, sure. I don't really think that North Korea Kim Jong-un will meet with President Trump, even if President Trump visits China and wants to meet with Kim Jong-un because of what is happening in Iran. In the report says that there is no reason why we cannot have good terms with the United States, but I think the Iran issue probably has changed that a little bit, because I think, especially given pretty, good relationship between Iran and North Korea, meeting with Trump at this point is going to be, it's not going to look very good. But really, I think that the biggest implications of what is happening in Iran is that, I think North Korea, the North Korean leadership is probably very frightened by the impressive capabilities that the United States has demonstrated, the ISR capabilities, intelligence capabilities, and precision strike capabilities. And that's essentially the decapitation operation. And the United States has done that pretty successfully in Venezuela. And so if I'm Kim Jong-un, I'll be pretty scared. And so, of course, I don't think that the U.S.'s attack against Iran will change the, likelihood of North Korea's denuclearization, because it was already close to zero. However, I think that it will probably make arms control deal between the United States and North Korea more difficult, because there was a discussion that, an arms control deal where North Korea would limit sort of ICBM capabilities while keeping theater nuclear arsenal. But I think that North Korea will probably be very resolute now, even more so than before, in maintaining its second strike capability against the United States.
Okay, outstanding. Let me get one last follow-up question in, and if there's time, I'm going to come to everybody for 30-second closing comments. Dr. Kim, the extended deterrence issue, interesting to me in what I picked up in the interventions here on this show. On the one hand, you have confidence in U.S. extended deterrence decreasing and declining, yet at the same time, you have a Trump administration that, number one, actively took out, for lack of a better term, with the Israelis, or at least severely degraded, I guess is more accurate, the Iranian nuclear capabilities, and on top of that, effectuated regime change in two different countries that you just mentioned. How is that squaring in South Korea, in Seoul, right? It's a very interesting set of data, or at least issues to unpack there. What's the reaction out of Seoul on all of that?
Yeah, well, I haven't talked to many South Koreans, but initial reaction is that I think in addition to the fear of abandonment, now South Koreans have sort of fear of entrapment, because any kind of operations like that, decapitation strikes, or even if it's surgical strikes, I think it will very much likely escalate into a bigger conflict, and then South Korea will be heavily, it will be in great danger. And so, yeah, I think that South Koreans are also watching this with trepidation.
Interesting. North Korea watching with awe and trepidation. South Korea, for a different set of reasons, trepidatious as well. All right, outstanding. All right, Ramon, final thoughts from you.
Well, I think that this last point about the fear of entrapment is quite important to note, because we have seen it in Europe, actually. There is obviously the strikes on Iran, and pretty much every single European country is now showing its support, even allowing the US to use their bases across Europe to launch strikes on Iran. But we have seen Turkey, for example, there was a missile being launched towards NATO that it had to be intercepted earlier today. So this is a very real fear that I would assume in Northeast Asia, South Korea, but I guess also the countries such as Japan would have, because we see it in Europe, a war that is not very popular across Europe, but which countries supporting the US and Israel, and also being on the receiving end of strikes coming out of Iran.
All right, outstanding. I didn't advertise or bill the Europe angle because I knew we'd run out of time, but you squeezed it in. So thank you, Ramon. Outstanding. All right, as always, outstanding work there. Sid, final word to you.
I think Lon, covered the ROK concerns on the left. Let me cover them on the right. It's a series of appeasement actions in the name of engagement, in the name of reaching out, cutting back balloon flights, broadcasts, reinstating parts of the CMA, moving exercises, and then seeking momentum to move towards OPCON transfer by the end of the Lee Jae-myung administration, are seen by conservatives, a good number of them, as undermining deterrence. And North Korea will see this as a weakening of the U.S. commitment to the ROK. It's not so much a question, will U.S. respond to a North nuke with the U.S. nuke, but whether will the U.S. be there at all. And so it's not surprising we get to this point when there's an active effort to try to reach out to the North, but it's something that President Lee Jae-myung will need to manage going forward.
All right, outstanding. Dr. Kim, final word to you.
No, I'm good.
You're good? No, you have. That's the first time in the history of our show that we've been good. All right, outstanding. Thank you. We are at time. Let me just wrap up and say we unpacked the Workers' Party Congress, talked a lot about defense and deterrence on the peninsula, the reaction in and around Iran, China, Russia, President Trump visit to China, and all of the machinations in and around Seoul from on both the right and the left that you both outlined quite articulately. So we packed a ton into this program. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Ramon, thank you. Lami, thank you. Sid, outstanding work here. And two last points. First, I would be remiss if I didn't plug Dr. Kim's new forthcoming book, Everything But the Bomb, South Korean's Nuclear Hedging Strategy, the theme here today. Looking forward to that, out of Stanford University Press. And we are now short and final, as they say, to the next KBO season. Go Doosan Bears. We are very, very excited for the upcoming 2026 KBO season. With that, see everybody in 2 weeks. Thanks for a great episode. Bye-bye.